Hey, everybody, welcome to our conversation with the FAA. And today we are graced with the presence of John Meehan and Steve Pansky. And we're going to go through and open this up for questions, but we'll wait a couple minutes after any questions. We can go through the presentation, but we'll wait a minute or two to let everybody get in, and then we'll get started. So be patient, and we'll be started shortly.
By the way, what's the Powerball lottery at now? I meant to ask somebody that. Hope you're on mute there, John Meehan.
It's more than Charles makes in a week.
I think it could be, yeah.
A little more. I think it was 1.7 the last time I saw it.
Really? Wow.
You go in a lot.
It was the second largest. It was the second largest lottery, and then of course they still selling tickets. So
I just can't imagine with that many people playing how they couldn't get a winner is what it is. You know, it's almost like you could probably, if you could identify all the different variations on the number, you could probably invest, $500 million and to win 1.7 billion. You know, you're gonna.
Well, your only gamble there is if you happen to have 2 or 3 winners.
That would be it. You would diminish your.
That would be I would have a sure shot at it, and there'd be 10 winners.
But you know what? I would accept 1/10 of that amount of money. I'm willing to do that. Maybe not to the investment of that portion, but
Yeah, that would be the one thing.
Mm.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So if we will, welcome everybody again. This is our conversation with the FAA with Drone Responders webinar. I'm Charles Warner, the Director of Drone Responders. Thanks for those of you that are here today. And I'm going to turn this over to John Meehan.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. John Meehan here. Mike O'Shea is out on a cruise, and I don't know who approved his leave time, but he's asked me to step in and fill in his very big shoes while he's gone. So I'll do my best. And but of course, I brought along some help. I have, of course, Steve Pansky, who is the all-knowing all things for the air traffic side of the house. And so we've got a few. We hopefully have a nice show for you today, and hopefully it'll be a good learning experience and a positive experience for you. Charles had told me that in previous webinars, we've done some polling, little knowledge quizzes or knowledge checks, and that seems to be a popular thing. So we've prepared some again for you today. So I think, Charles, why don't we start with that? And then when we're done with the polling, then I have a presentation prepared for you, and both Steve and I will be presenting some things for you. And feel free to ask questions. If we can't answer them, of course, we'll come back to you. So here we have the poll is open. There are 10 questions here. You have to answer all of them and then submit in order for your votes to count. We're not taking names or anything like that, so don't worry about that. But so I'll walk you through it, and then that way we'll know that time everybody's answers. So the first question: operations flown by public aircraft are governed by Title 14 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 91. Is that true or is that false? Second question: drones operating under Part 91 or Part 107 must be registered regardless of their weight. Is that true or is that false? Third question: remote ID does apply to public safety. Is that true or is that false? And remote ID means remote identification of UAS. Number 4, remote ID compliance for operators has been postponed. Is that true or is that false? Number 5, remote ID can be switched on or off depending on the mission. Is that true or is that false? Number 6, operating over people in a non-life safety emergency is permitted by a public safety UAS aircraft by their COA. Is that true or is that false? Number 7, a tactical beyond visual line of sight COA relieves the remote pilot of collision responsibility in Title 14 CFR Part 91.111, which is operating near other aircraft. Is that true or is that false? Number 8, beyond visual line of sight, obstruction shielding 107.31 waiver relieves the remote pilot from see and avoid responsibility with other aircraft. Is that true or is that false? And number 9, using the video from a drone's onboard camera system as your primary means of avoiding other aircraft, persons, or moving vehicles complies with the visual line of sight requirements of 107.31. So if you screen watch, is that allowed without a waiver? And number 10, operations conducted as a public aircraft are subject to the pilot records database reporting requirements of 14 CFR Part 111. Is that true or is that false? So we've got 16 of you have answered so far. So let's get the other folks in. All right. So folks are coming through now. I need to play my Jeopardy music. You're on mute, Charles. All right, what do you say we, looks like 22 of the 28 folks have answered, so why don't we give you 5 more seconds here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, why don't we end the poll now? You're on mute, Charles. Do I have to do the mute or end the poll? You're still on mute, Charles. So I'm going to go ahead and there we go. All right, so let's do this. Okay, here we go. So the answers: operations flown by a public aircraft are governed by 14 CFR Part 91. That is true. Remember, under Title 14, everything that flies in the air is essentially either governed by the exception, the limited exception under 44809, or it's governed by Title 14, which is has a number of different parts. Part 91 is the part that applies to public aircraft and civil aircraft above 55 pounds for drones. So number 2, drones operating under Part 91 or 107 must be registered regardless of weight. That is true. Drones of any weight that are flown for under Title 14 must be registered, which also implies for number 3, it leads right into number 3. Remote ID applies to public safety. Yes, that is true. And I've got 100% folks got that right. So that's great. Number 4, remote ID compliance for operators has been postponed. That is false. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation coming up. That's a commonly misunderstood thing. It has not been postponed. All right, number 5, remote ID can be switched on or off depending on the mission. That is false. That's something we really want to, we're also going to talk about that in the upcoming presentation. Want to make sure you all understand that. Number 6, operating over people in non-life safety situations is permitted in your COAs for public safety. That is false. That is false. You have to have, it has to be a life safety emergency. And the expectation is very similar to 107, where you don't fly over people whenever you don't have to. If you do need to fly over people, your COA does allow for that in a life safety situation only, and you can always call the SOSC if you have a situation that you can't handle. All right, number 7, a tactical beyond visual line of sight COA relieves the remote pilot of collision responsibility in Part 91.111. That is false. You are typically given relief from some parts of 91.113B. So take a look at that. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to reinforce the idea that, hey, you're governed by Part 91, and there's more to Part 91 than just what's on your COA. Need to look at that. Number 8, BV loss obstruction shielding waiver relieves the pilot of see and avoid responsibility with other aircraft. That is false. Take a look at that one as well. Look at your waiver, read your COA, right? Charles, is one of my, I think they're going to put that on my tombstone. Read your COA. Number 9, Using the video from your drone's onboard camera as your primary means of avoiding other aircraft, no, that is false. It has to be with vision unaided by any other device other than spectacles, and you must be able to see it at all times during its entire flight. Number 10, operations conducted as a public aircraft are subject to the pilot records database reporting. Yes, that is true. Probably more applicable to your manned teammates, but it also applies to manned operations and unmanned operations there. So, Charles, I think we can close that out, right? Yeah. Okay. So I'll go right into the next portion of our presentation today, which is I have a little presentation for you. Bear with me one second while we get it set up here. Okay. Thank you all again for attending, and hopefully this will be a good experience for you. When I do these webinars for my colleagues at the FAA, I typically have a session, I call it "And the Answer Is," and I try to watch what sort of questions are coming into our UAS Support Center, and I also get lots of questions from our FSDOs. So what I've done is I've essentially put in some of these questions for you, and hopefully most of you already know this, but one of the common questions we get is, hey, where does the drone registration number go? And it really, the requirement is for legible and on the exterior of the aircraft. You may recall that in the early days, we allowed people to put it in the battery compartment, but that changed a long time ago. So it has to be external. And one of the things I want you as public safety to understand is that that is not the number that's the drone remote ID serial number. And the remote ID serial number does not need to be posted on the exterior of the aircraft. So what you should look for as public safety, and what you need to have with yours, is the FAA drone registration, either the Part 48 number or the Part 47N number has to be on external. Now, one thing I want to make you aware of is that the regulation Part 89 does require the drone manufacturers to put a label on the drone saying that it's remote ID compliant. That doesn't mean they will put the remote ID serial number on there. So just be aware of that. And I know from personal experience, finding the remote ID serial number is a challenge for a lot of operators out there. So you may need to help them figure that out. Okay, another question we get a lot from public safety. Hey, I just saw a product demo, really cool product. They're doing some beyond visual line of sight or autonomous operations. And if I buy that, does that mean I can use it without a waiver? And the answer is no. So be aware of that many of those product entities have a waiver. And so they can do that because they have obtained the waiver. So you as the operator, remember that the visual line of sight rules are applicable both as a public aircraft flying under Part 91 or as a civil aircraft flying under Part 107. So if you want to go beyond visual line of sight, even with this really cool equipment, you're going to have to get a waiver to that. So we want to make you aware of that. Okay, we talked about this already a little bit. What's the latest on the remote ID of UAS? So what the FAA announced very recently was a policy of discretionary enforcement. So it doesn't mean it's been postponed. And this is the link to the Federal Register. It's on this document. And Charles, if you can copy and paste that into the chat. And later, by the way, folks, we have some handy links for you in the, we'll post that in the chat for you, which will summarize as well. But it's a discretionary enforcement, which means essentially that if you can comply today, the expectation is that you will comply today, and otherwise comply as soon as possible. So there's no delay. It's in effect. It's just we're going to use our discretion. If you're trying to comply, we'll probably be a little bit more lenient on you as opposed to someone who's being a scofflaw completely.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Just wanted to add the other thing about that is we know from hearing from manufacturers and others that it's not a fast process necessarily of getting a broadcast module if you need one. So that's the other reason is get it now. order it now because it may take 2 months to get it. So you don't want to wait till that enforcement date to change and then not be able to get it.
Yep. And, you know, as part of discretion, if you're making an effort, that certainly helps you, right? If you're not making an effort, well, we're going to, you know, that is a factor, right? So when you go click on this link, let me get off there. When you click on this link, it's about a 5-page document, and you'll see on my next page there, you can, the Reader's Digest version, you just skip to the last page, and in there it says a summary of policy, and it's a couple of paragraphs there. I really encourage you to read that, and that this is essentially what it says, that we did not extend the deadline for compliance, and the expectation is if you can comply, that you do comply.
That link is in the chat.
Great, thank you. So yeah, so thank you for doing that. One thing I want to make you aware is that the manufacturers of your drones were already supposed to be complying with remote ID going back as far as September of 2022, and we did discretionary enforcement for them until the end of the year as well. But right now, any new drones that are designed or produced for anyone except the U.S. government has to come with standard remote ID. Now, be aware that they could have produced it before September of 2022 and put it on the shelf, and technically they would be in compliance because it was designed or produced before that deadline. So check that. I would encourage you to check that when you.
And it's important to note that it's not manufactured, like it's not Skydio or DJI or anybody, all of those drones. You got to look specifically at the models.
Yeah, and I'll cover that here in a later part of the presentation, how to do that. So I already covered this in the polling. Can I turn this off? No, this is not like the automated data broadcasting out like the ADSB. This is not something you can turn on and off. And so, and the systems is required that once the unit is powered on, that it's functioning. And Part 89 does require you as the operator to verify that it does work before you take off.
Now, one caveat here, there is a waiver that can be requested.
Yeah, comes right into, so, and I did not prompt Charles to set that question up. So here is, yeah, this is the question. So does it apply to public safety? And the answer is yes, it does, because any drone that has to be registered has to comply with remote ID essentially, and all drones flown under Part 91 or Part 107 have to be registered. So that's what's driving the requirement. But there's these links here are where you would go if you want to get some relief from remote ID. And if you're law enforcement and you have a security sensitive one, you would send an email to that one. And when in doubt, just send it to RID authorizations at FAA.gov, and they'll sort that out for you. And then, of course, as is the case with any waivers or airspace authorizations that you need in an emergency situation, you can get a temporary emergency waiver or authorization from the FAA, from the Systems Operations Support Center, the SOSC, which we've talked about often on this particular webinar. So that is also an avenue for you. Okay. So how do you find out if your drone or the broadcast module that you've purchased is remote ID compliant? You're going to go to this web page, the UASdoc.faa.gov, and you can see here this is the page that will, this is the second page. It's going to pop up and it say view public DOCs. You'd click on that. You would come here and you'd see the search button. This is a very handy tool, in my opinion. You can also filter by operations over people or RID. So there's lots of different ways, but I would click on this search and I would put in my make and model. And let's just say, for example, I had a Lucid Bots Sherpa and I wanted to, so I type in Lucid Bots and it'll populate a bunch of their machines that have been accepted by the FAA. And then this will pop up, and you notice here it says accepted remote ID declaration of compliance, but it doesn't mean all serial numbers have been accepted. You really need to go to this area here to check your particular serial number. And there's two selections there, the view and the download. What I found trying to help one of my friends to do this is I actually had to download the CSV file and then do a Control F to search for his particular serial number. And in the case of the Lucid bots, this is their prefix, the 1877 Echo, and that's each manufacturer will have their own prefix, but that's how we found the serial numbers, because when you click on view, it'll just pop up like the first page of it. So check that out. And then remember that if it's not on this list, the FAA deems it as not compliant. So when you're talking with your manufacturer supplier, and have them show you what the remote ID serial number is. Now, a lot of them are still in the process of updating firmware. They're updating, people are applying for, people are making declarations of compliance, and the FAA is reviewing them. So this is a constantly changing number of drones and broadcast modules that have been not approved, but accepted as FAA. Their FAA accepted declarations of compliance. Okay. Another question we often get from public safety, particularly the law enforcement, say, hey, we have a whole bunch of drone issues we want to report to the FAA. What do we do with them? And I call it, throwing the ball over the wall. If you really want to help us help you, we need some information from you. And the FSDOs, the Flight Standards District offices, often tell me, look, I need some basic facts. And if I don't have the facts or witness statements, it's very difficult to action. So, just telling us that there was a drone over there by this light pole at 10 o'clock at night, it's not much we can do with that. We don't track drones in the sky, like we do with aircraft. So we don't just tell us that, hey, I saw a drone over here. What do you know about it? We don't know anything about it. So we need those witness statements that you went up. And remember, drone people flying under Part 107 have to show their photo ID to you, their drone registration, to you. So hopefully you can get that. And we need that to help do that. If you see criminal activity, potentially, obviously that's where our law enforcement assistance program, any criminal activity with an aircraft, that definitely needs to be referred to what we call our LEAP people. I know Mike has talked about LEAP often. We've had LEAP people on this show. If it's aviation safety related, that's for us. That's definitely for us. So gather those facts and send it to your local Flight Standards District office. A lot of confusion about privacy complaints, voyeurism. That's not the FAA. That's local law enforcement. And then the other thing we want to make you aware of is that some of you are considering acquiring some equipment. There is an advisory, a joint advisory that's been produced going back to, I think, 2020, I believe, from the Department of Justice and other agencies. And definitely you want to read that and have your legal folks read that as you make your decisions about what equipment you might acquire and whether or not it's a good idea or not. So, and of course, always, when in doubt, reach out to your LEAP agent and they'll get you coordinated there. So I am now going to pass the baton to the all-knowing, the all-wise, the sage counsel, Steve Pansky. So Steve, over to you. And then we will answer questions too.
So I was going to turn around and look for that person when you start talking about him. That's what it is. But
all right, just tell me to advance the slides when you're ready, Steve.
I'll let you know. Yes, thank you. So as a reminder for everybody, my name is Steve Pansky. I'm with Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC. I'm under contract support with the FAA to provide assistance to them with the unmanned aircraft program. I started back in 2009. Where I was brought in to assist in coordinating with law enforcement. And that's where we first started to work on how we can provide for greater access of public safety, not just law enforcement, but fire and first responders to be able to operate in the national airspace system. And we've come a long way from from 2009 to today, because I was just having a discussion with somebody earlier this morning, and they reminded me that back in 2009, when you applied for a COA to operate as a public aircraft operator, you had to have completed the ground course, the pilot ground course, just to fly in Class G airspace. And oh gosh, if you wanted to fly in controlled airspace, you had to hold a private pilot's license. So yes, we have come a long way since then, and we continue to advance forward as we continue to learn more about not just the technology, but the environment that they're operating within. And as we like to always say, that if the answers that we provide you today or the discussions we talk about today might not be accurate tomorrow, we just want to provide you what the latest information is that we have today. And obviously, we're always trying to lean forward to determine how we can best integrate unmanned aircraft into the national airspace system. So having said that, John, if you would advance one slide there, thank you very much. So I wanted to leave this very limited to what the topic is that's of interest to most individuals today. Is not that I just have I have a COA operator as a public aircraft operator, and I have to maintain visual line of sight with my aircraft, but we have developed a few programs here where we can extend that by providing a limited amount of beyond visual line of sight capabilities to the public agencies that are operating to help assist you in providing, the access to complete your missions. And as such, these are the four really topics I wanted to talk about today. I've spoken to these in the past, and today I'll probably reiterate what I've said before, but I'll give you some updates especially on the tactical, since we've had a few more of those since last time. So next slide, please. So first one is always drone as a first responder. As everybody used to say, this is the Chula Vista model. This is what it was down in San Diego that they operated there. And a lot of agencies have visited Chula Vista and have seen their operation there and how they're operating. And this basically is an operation where you have a visual observer who's actually sitting on a rooftop and who's watching the aircraft and the airspace around them. And they are basically providing visual detection of intruder aircraft and their ability to alert the pilot in command that in fact there's a potential risk, and maneuvering the aircraft so as to avoid that risk. And really that's what the drone as a first responder program was really designed about that program. We've ran about 45 or 50 of these operations have been approved, is what it is, and out of this was sort of a leaning forward of how we could improve upon this program, and we'll get to another one here in a second that sort of takes us a little bit further along that avenue. Next slide, please. This one came out of the idea that you're at the scene of the operational location there, and you have a need to fly beyond where the aircraft can be seen. However, it's in close proximity to you. This works out well when you want to fly behind, let's say, a building or behind a fence line to see what's on the back end of the operational area there before you send somebody over the fence, or before you maybe have somebody make an entry into the building. We see a lot of these with fire events where they want to fly around the exposure part of the structure to look at exposed areas, to look at possibly areas of the rooftop which can't be seen, where the aircraft is, you lose visual sight of the aircraft, to look for hot spots on the roof, tanker trucks that have turned over and it's spewing some kind of fumes or whatever, and you need to fly the aircraft to a location where you can read the labeling on the outside of the fuel truck to determine what's happening there. This is just examples of the types of operations that have been done here. It is limited in that you have to be within 1,500 feet of the aircraft when you conduct these operations, and the aircraft cannot be any greater than 50 feet from the obstruction that you're flying behind that is obscuring you from being able to see the aircraft. It does have an altitude limitation of 400 feet, or the UASFM map that is there for controlled airspace or in Class G airspace. You can't exceed 400 feet for the operations. Since my last presentation, we've jumped already up to about 480 of these tactical beyond visual line of sight approvals that have gone through, and we can continue to run about 20 to 30 of these a month is what we're seeing new agencies that are utilizing this for their operational missions. Next slide. We just recently, I'd say recently in the last 6 months, instituted or brought forward a new program, which was really came out of the civil side of the house, where they were able to allow for operations where you're not necessarily seeing the aircraft and the airspace around you, but you're protecting from where the aircraft is operating at. And this involves you being able to see at least 2 miles from where the aircraft is at. And this way you're identifying any type of intruder aircraft that might be within, for lack of a better word, striking distance of where your unmanned aircraft is operating, and you're able to communicate with the pilot command, unless it is the pilot command who's managing the airspace, and to be able to allow them to be able to navigate to remain clear of other aircraft. You cannot, under this one, you cannot exceed the UASFM maps, which is the facility maps, which are the basis for which Lance was really designed around. The same mapping program that Lance uses is the mapping program. So when you're operating controlled airspace, if you do not exceed the USFM maps, you'll be able to operate under that. And then if you're operating within Class G airspace, do not exceed at or below at or above 400 feet for those operations. You have a flight visibility restriction you have to maintain. But it does allow you to be able to use visual enhancements such as binoculars to be able to scan the sky, to be able to utilize that for assisting you in being able to identify intruder aircraft. So this has been of great value. There's about 45 of these applications that have gone out. Many of them have been approved, but we're currently at sort of a hold on the first responder program. They are doing some coordination in-house within the FAA and coordinating with the service centers that are processing the applications. But I'm cautiously optimistic that we will see in the near future the processing of these, or continue the processing of these kind of operations. Like the tactical beyond visual line of sight, the first responder does provide a list of conditions and provisions that you comply with. And if you provide those conditions and provisions to the FAA in the processing of your application, they then are able to use that and then be able to approve this operation. And that's what these are really based around, that kind of a program. Next slide. And then not to be able for a Part 107 operator who can't utilize the other programs, since they're really based upon the operations of those public operators that are operating under COAs for those operations. There is a program out there which is a obstruction shielding program for the operations of Part 107 operators. This is restricted to daytime operations only, at or below 400 feet, and restricted to Class G airspace. But it authorizes you, if you remain within 50 feet of the obstruction that you're operating within, and you do have ADS-B in as one of your capabilities, it does allow you to be able to fly beyond visual line of sight. And you can imagine this being a great program, especially for civil operators that are doing, let's say, pipeline or power line inspections, and allowing them to be able to operate out of those, and so long as they're within close proximity, as I mentioned, to the obstruction as they're flying along those operations. Next slide, please.
Hey, Steve, with that, I just wanted to add to it. I think Chris Doherty had explained to us on the obstructed shielding waiver, one of the problems is that you still have to address in your waiver request your flight over people. That's still part of what they're looking at. That was where they were actually denying a lot of those, because people weren't addressing that in the waivers.
Very good, and that's a good thing to bring up, Charles. Yeah, that is you do have to address that as part of your submission of your application in drone zone for your for that approval for under Part 107, to address that operations over people. So here's some contact information for you. Again, if you have questions and concerns on a daily basis, or things that you don't have answers to, we always like to direct you to U.S. Help Desk, because they're a great funnel point, if you will, for being able to either provide you with direct information, or they can link you with the right office that has the correct answers to connect you up with those. And as John had mentioned earlier, the Law Enforcement Assistance Program, LEAP, great resource for operations, and there's their link there. And if you don't know who your LEAP agent is, you can get a hold of them and contact them. They'll be more than happy to connect somebody up with you, and they'll be more than happy to obviously come out and contact with you. They're also, as of lately, you've seen a lot of questions and concerns about other departments or whatever operating, in some question as to whether they're operating legally or not legally. And LEAP has been a great resource to come out and have a discussion with them and talk to them about their programs and assist them. And if they are operating their programs and there's some questionable actions or operations they're conducting, they're a great resource to actually go out there and have a discussion with them and speak with them about how they can do that. Plus, they'll connect them up with the right resource again to be able to have a discussion about expanding their programs if they want to do that, such as beyond visual line of sight or other operations that they may want to be conducting to give them greater access into the National Airspace System. And the last button here talks about the contact points for Michael Shea, which I'm sure everybody has in their, excuse the phrase, Rolodex. That's from old school for you. and for myself and for John Meehan, our contact points here. Yeah. So having said that, why don't we, I think is the question mark, why don't we open it up?
Yeah, we have quite a bunch of questions. We'll do our best. We'll do our best to answer them.
Let me give a couple updates. One, this is recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel, Drone Responders YouTube channel, probably by Friday, as well as the other ones we've had for the past year. So if you want to go back and look through any of those. I wanted to follow up on what Steve Pansky was talking about as far as the FRB loss waivers, and we've heard there is a delay. I have reached out directly to the 91.113 waiver team, and as they've indicated that there is some additional coordinating requirements that they're looking for, and I've asked them if they could identify what those coordinating requirements are so that we could actually inform all the waiver applicants, and this is on behalf of the Drone as a First Responder Working Group, that we can help them expedite the process any way possible. And they have really been great at advancing things for us over this past year. We want to keep it that way as we're seeing more and more interest in this field. So that's it. So let's move on to questions.
Yeah, so let's go after the questions. So we'll start with the first one here. Does the FAA have a preference in what type of drone devices being used? No, we don't. We're platform agnostic. That's up to you. So whoever told you that, they were misinformed.
Let me add a little more to that. As drone responders, we don't recommend any specific drone either. We recommend that you determine what your missions are, what your geography is, what your weather conditions are going to be, and then look at that. But you also need to look at your state laws to determine if there are any limitations on the purchase of any types of drones, because there are some state legislatures taking action to ban DJI and Chinese drones, just for your awareness.
Yeah, and I often get the question about the blue list, and the blue list has got really nothing to do with the FAA. That's as Charles mentioned, that may be up to your state or your local government or your local leadership. The DoD has that blue list. The FAA, we're about the airspace management, and we're platform agnostic. As long as you comply with the flight rules, that we're happy about that.
And I was also, John, let me mention that this, like drone responders, this is a great resource for you to reach out to other organizations and speak with them and see what kind of missions are they conducting? What is your mission set? What do you need to do? And see the technologies they're using. That's your best source, I think, for determining what type of technology is going to best meet your needs, because we find out all the time that people are purchasing things because it was a good deal. Somebody knocked on their front door and said, hey, I got the perfect equipment for you. And then come to find out it sits on a shelf because it doesn't meet the mission. It doesn't work for you. So yes, use the resources like drone responders to get out there and find out what your best technology is.
If you go to our website, you can go to the dashboard where we have over 1,400 agencies actually sharing all that information on a map that you can click on and get the information.
Great. Okay, and next one. I'm not quite sure I totally understand the question, but basically I think the question is, do public safety drones using a system that is remote ID compliant, is it transmitting a signal? Yes, it is. And it's just like anybody else's signal. There's no encryption. One of the misunderstandings that I think the industry has is, oh, my personal information's in there. No, it is not. It's got very specific message elements. you want to look at 14 CFR Part 89, and in Part 89, it'll tell you what those message elements are. You can also look at the advisory circulars 89-1 and 89-2, but there's no PII, personally identifiable information in there. But that information is an unencrypted signal going out to whoever has a receiver. So yes, and John Q. Public, if they have a receiver, should be able to identify a drone that is flying there, that there's a drone, and locate the operator. Now,
and the question, is it a concern for public safety? It is, and that's
it's a concern for everybody. It's a concern for public safety. It's a concern for 107 people. Now, remember that particularly in this early stage of evolution of remote ID, that you can request relief, and it's in the PowerPoint presentation how to go about doing that. But
I just wanted to add that that waiver is for sensitive missions only.
Right, but there is
a lot of the aircraft.
Yep, there is a mechanism for other, maybe less sensitive, and now there's no guarantee that we'll say yes, but the old saying, right? Don't ask, you don't get, right? So our ID authorizations at FAA.gov, for example, some entities have already written in saying, hey, I've got this equipment, it doesn't have, it's going to get remote ID, or we're in 6 months, and they got an authorization from that. So
Go
ahead.
There is a concern for public safety that they're able to be located as far as where the remote pilot is. That's why this sensitive thing. But what you have to understand is most of the manufacturers that have developed this built-in broadcasting, there is no way to turn it off at this point. And that's where it's been recommended. If you have the waiver for these sensitive missions, you may want to look at having some older aircraft, or keeping older aircraft that doesn't have a broadcast module, or having a broadcast module that you can turn off and on. But for the most part, it's going to be on.
Yeah, and remember also that one of the reasons for remote identification of UAS is to lay the foundation and the building blocks for routine beyond visual line of sight flying, right? You can't really do those routinely unless you know where those drones are from an air traffic management point of view. So it's a tough one. Is the waiver process still applicable? Yes, it is, Nick. Do police officers understand the tech they're using? I hope so. Because if they fly an aircraft in the National Airspace System, they better, and their boss better, make sure they know, because the boss needs to understand what 14 CFR 1.1 definition of a person. That's always one I always like to bring up. How long does it take the FAA to approve a new drone for compliance? Well, remember, we don't approve a drone. We accept a declaration of compliance based on using an FAA accepted means of compliance. So if the manufacturer has all their ducks in a row, when I understand now, this is, today is the 11th of October, 2023. So it's taking, I think, around 90 days right now for them to work through that process. That may change. It changes all the time based on workload. But let's see. Additional training. Would we recommend additional training? You know what? One of the reasons I went into aviation, and my son is actually learning how to be a Navy fighter pilot right now. And one of the things we both agree on is that the one thing about aviation is it's constant learning. Every day I study, every day I learn new things. I always recommend getting additional training, but particularly with drones, I always recommend head work, a lot of studying. Get out those VFR sectionals and play quiz the wizard with each other. That's always a great way.
And if you want more specifics on some opportunities or different ways to get training, if you send me an email at charles@droneresponders.org, I'll give you some additional information of some of the agencies out there that are doing some of the good training.
Yeah, I think this question about how long does it take to launch a drone, I think that's really, I'm going to punt that one to Charles, because, the SOSC, Steve and I started working together back in 2017, and I remember this is when Hurricane Harvey hit. That was a big epiphany for the FAA and a real great learning experience, both for the FAA and for public safety using drones. And approvals from the SOSC took quite a while initially, but they really sped up during that event. And now, I mean, I'm gonna defer to Charles because I'm hearing it takes minutes, and
so there's a couple different aspects of this question. When you say how long does it take the police officer to launch a drone, that in and of itself can be done within 30 or 40 seconds, but it also depends on the type of drone, the size of the drone, the complexity of the drone as to how fast it can be launched. Typically, most of these drones that public safety are using now have a 30 to 40 minute flight time. So if you're looking at that record, now if you're trying to do something that's beyond your COA or beyond Part 107, that's where the SOSC comes in. And we are seeing that the SOSC, especially in these life safety missions, are giving a verbal go-ahead within 3 to 4 minutes, and then they take care of deconflicting the airspace, but you will have to follow up with documentation of what you did, where you did it, and the circumstances.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, here's a great one. How do I get involved with public safety? I'm assuming this is from a non-public safety person. You know, I used to, there was a while there that I was part of the Civil Air Patrol, and I learned about the incident command structure, and civilian volunteers are always, a tough one for them, but establish a relationship with them. And, they're not going to, in fact, we would be not impressed with an entity using anybody off the street that they didn't know anything about their training and their competence, right? And because once you start working under an entity's COA or their waiver, they are on the hook they're responsible for how you perform that and your compliance. So relationships matter, and that's how I would go about that.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple more points. One, go to Drone Responders. You can look up SOPs. You can learn all about droneresponders.org. It's free membership. You can access the different folders of operations to get a feel for how things work. But if you want to get some background, you also have opportunities to go to the FEMA website, fema.gov, and they have online courses for ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800, which give you that background and understanding of operations under an incident command system, and you can get certified online free. So
yeah, and the time to do that is before the emergency, right?
Yeah, got to do it before.
Do it when times are calm, and I always, in fact, I remember encouraging entities. If you're the one unit for your entire county, you're probably going to need at some point to augment your team with civilian volunteers who actually you have confidence in and know that. So I would definitely encourage that.
And some places like
California,
some places like Campbell, California are allowing certain members community emergency response team, but they train them to meet the requirements of how they want them to fly and understand the ICS structure.
Yeah, and for you, those of you who are on this webinar who are in those decision-making positions, I would recommend you read 14 CFR 1.1 definition of a person, because it's not just the pilot who is responsible. It could be the entity, could be the city, could be the county, could be public safety as well. I'm going to punt this one to Steve, the first responder, the BVLOS COAs. Are they for Class G, or are they more flexible, shall we say?
No, definitely. We've issued COAs for operations in controlled airspace. It can all be done. You just need to address, depending on the type of operation you're requesting. The example, the tactical does not have restriction for only Class G. If you have a jurisdictional COA and it includes operations in Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Surface Echo, then it can be approved to include those. You're just complying with the UASFM map that authorizes those operations within the controlled airspace. And that's typically what you'll see in all the codes that we write when you're operating in controlled airspace, is what it is. And oh, by the way, if you need to operate at a location in controlled airspace and it doesn't authorize it in the USFM, you again have the ability to go to the SOSC and request a approval, special governmental interest, to be able to operate there if you need to do those operations. And again, they have the ability to do that necessary coordination to get you that access to get into there. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Why are obstruction shielding approvals limited to Part 107? They're the equivalent of a tactical beyond visual line of sight for COA amendment, in my opinion. And they're really, it's really about, it's a safety mitigation to stay close to that. But Steve, I'm going to punt to you if
I would say that if you applied for a beyond visual line of sight approval and you provided all the same conditions and provisions under the COA that was issued to somebody for obstruction shielding, it would be interesting to see how that went through the process. I have not seen one come in yet that specifically does that, but I don't see a reason why you could not apply under the within the 91.113 waiver process to apply for that and see where it takes you to.
Yeah,
and I think that the opportunity here is, if you look at utilities and the rural inspection of utility lines and those kind of things, that's part of what the obstructed shielding waiver was for, is to be longer distance for utilities and some other things. But we still recommend that everybody be Part 107 under, even if you have a COA. So if you are Part 107, you can apply for this OS waiver as well.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. Can you explain the requirements for question 10 in the poll? And the question was, it was really a statement. Operations conducted as a public aircraft are subject to the pilot records database. Yeah. So take a look at, you can go to ecfr.gov, Echo Charlie Foxtrot Romeo.gov, and you'll see, you can type in Title 14 and look in Part 111, and I think it's subpart Bravo or Charlie. It's one of those where it actually discusses what the reporting requirements are. And this goes back to, really goes, I think the impetus for this was the Colgan air crash and some other crashes where they did an investigation and found out that the pilots were marginal or had some issues, and the hiring entity didn't know about that. So it's probably more applicable to the public aircraft manned units, but it is applicable also to all public aircraft, both unmanned and manned. And I know Nick has also asked a question about the medical. I don't know the answer to that, Nick, but I do recall that when the pilot record database Part 111 came out, the FAA entity that works on that did do a couple of webinars, and they are on YouTube. And there is an advisory circular that's published on that. And I'll get with Charles and I'll send him the numbers there. But there is more information about that. But there is something about that medical question, as I recall, but I don't know the answer to that. What do I think of Skydio drones? I have no comment on that. We're not in the business of, we're not drone testers. We're not anything like that. Sorry.
I'll add to that. You said, why did they pull DJI drones off the shelf? Skydio has no ability to pull drones off of a shelf in any regard. Anything that's happened has been through state legislatures as far as the ban, if that's what you're referring. So yeah, that's all there is to say about that.
Can we get a copy of the slide deck? Yes, Charles will be able to get it to you, and no problem there.
Yeah, send an email to me, charles@droneresponders.org, and I'll send you a copy of the slides.
If that device is broadcasting a signal, what else is it broadcasting? You have to ask the manufacturer. I don't know. I don't know what it's I don't design them, but sorry. Do all public safety officers have to have these waivers to hide their ID? I'm not sure I understand. You're talking about the remote ID. Yes, because a remote ID applies to any drone that has to be registered. Any drone you fly in your job has to be registered. Remote ID applies to you. If you want relief from that, you have to get an authorization from the FAA.
And it's only for certain missions, and routine operations are not included.
Yeah, traffic stuff. No, we're probably going to say no. Asking a question about DJI controllers. Again, I know nothing to say about particular models, I don't know. You have to ask the manufacturer.
We do know that with the broadcast modules, that what you may get is the return to home location. As far as the location, it won't necessarily give the location of the remote control.
General question about how are drones used in disasters? You know, I think the Association of Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International, I never forget, they had a statement, you know, that if it's dirty, dangerous, or dull, it's a perfect job for a drone. And they're really, I'm a former helicopter pilot, and I can tell you there's places that I would not be comfortable flying in a helicopter, that you want to get eyes and cameras on there or systems on there. So drones are perfect for that. And so
drones are being used in almost every disaster, for disaster assessments, for search and rescue, for looking at the pile as far as recovery, but almost every disaster is being used.
Yeah, I mean they're tremendous. You know, Jet Rangers cost $3,000 an hour to operate. You know, so there's such a great leverage, and I really believe that they're complementary assets. They're not competing assets. So anyway, Charles, I think we've answered pretty much most of the questions, unless anybody's got another one, or you've got any burning questions of your own, which I know you.
Yeah, well, you've given the information for your all's contact information. If you have FAA questions, you've gotten the references of who to ask. If you have additional questions that are beyond the FAA, you're welcome to send an email to me, charles@droneresponders.org. And
yeah, and I you know, this UAS help at FAA.gov, they can coach you a little bit. Not, you know, they're not going to spoon feed you, but reach out to them if you have questions, and they will point you in the right direction. So, well, I hope it's been, I know we're starting to run up close to the end of the time here. I hope it's been useful for you. Thank you very much for what you do. And Charles, thank you for the opportunity to fill in Mike's big shoes. And Steve, thank you very much as well. So I've got nothing else to say today. Back to you, Charles.
Yeah, I want to say the same thing. Thanks for everybody participating. We do now have 824 people that are registered to get the notices of the webinars. So while people aren't necessarily here on the day that we do them, there's a great deal of people that go and visit the YouTube channel and are taking advantage of those recorded sessions. So again, John, Steve, thank you all for being here. We'll see you again next month, the second Wednesday of the month at 4 p.m. Eastern time for our next session, and hopefully we'll be able to hear all about Mike's cruise.
Yes. All right.
So thank you all. That ends this podcast. See you next month. Thanks, everybody.
Great.